Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold from Yeshua Katan. Quite a wide variety of stories here this evening, including probably the most significant one, the U.S. doing a nighttime raid on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, taking him and his wife, flying them to the United States. So we'll have those details. Also, China doing some very provocative military drills all the way around Taiwan. But of course, that comes after the U.S. decides and agrees to an $11 billion military arms deal with Taiwan. So China's kind of showing them, look, we have this force also. So we have a lot of stories to cover. First, though, this is not just your average run-of-the-mill sickness. They're calling it the super flu, and that's this year here, what's developing here this winter, the super flu. Let's take a look at this report here by Inside Edition to see what they say. Take a look.
The super flu is here, and it's wreaking havoc across the nation.
It seems like everyone is getting the flu. The Centers for Disease Control report cases spiking.
What we're seeing right now is a very rapid escalation in cases.
So far, 7.5 million cases of the flu have been reported, resulting in 81,000 hospitalizations and 3,100 deaths. New York State just experienced the highest number of flu cases ever recorded in a single week.
It feels like I'm dying.
Symptoms include fever, cough, headaches, runny nose, fatigue, muscle aches, and chills. Those stricken with the super flu are taking to social media, warning everyone just how bad it is.
I've never been this sick. I've never been this sick.
My eyeballs felt like they were actually going to explode.
Anna Gross, who is 20 weeks pregnant, ended up in the hospital.
They were packed. I'm talking the ER was slammed. Everyone was coughing. Everyone's masked up. I was talking to the nurse that was handling my breathing treatments and stuff, and she said that the flu has just ransacked the hospital.
The super flu variant originated in Europe, and we're hearing reports of voluntary health checks at airports in the USA for international travelers.
With millions of people flying over the holidays, it's a smart idea to take precautions. Where you sit on the plane can actually help you dodge the super flu. Dr. Michael Dano says stay away from aisle seats.
It certainly provides you a protective barrier against additional passengers walking by or in the seats next to you.
So that's a better seat than mine.
Absolutely.
Another tip, turn on the overhead air vents to create a zone of clean air in front of your face.
Even if you just put it on for just a moderate amount of speed, it does provide this invisible layer of protection around you.
If you're high risk of complications, then you might have to think more carefully about your New Year's plan. If you're low risk and you're generally healthy, then you have a lot more leeway.
Yeah, it's always a big deal when you get to this time of the year and dealing with the flus, but to have something that's considered a super flu, and we're seeing the amount of cases and the deaths, that's probably got a lot of people worried if they're going to catch that, and if they do, how bad it'll be and how long will they have it.
Right, and as we saw there already, the hospitals are flooded, 7.5 million cases reported, so no telling where that will go.
That's right. Well, in the final weeks of 2025, more strikes on alleged drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean took place, but the U.S. Southern Command reported 5 boats were targeted and at least 8 people were killed. Well, this took place along a well-known narco trafficking route.
Well, the U.S. military claims the boats had made drug deliveries before the strikes were carried out, but have not provided any proof to lend support to that claim. There were 3 people killed on one boat alone in the first of 2 days of strikes, and it was reported that immediately after the first boat was struck, people jumped overboard from the additional boats. Now, search and rescue efforts were launched, but it is not clear if any survivors have been found.
Well, the following day, an additional 5 people were killed in similar strikes. In total, since September, there have been at least 115 deaths as a direct result of the U.S. attack on 35 different boats in the region.
The White House has taken some heat from legal experts as well as some Democrats, but President Trump defends the military operation, saying they are necessary to cut out the flow of drugs into the United States.
Well, today there are a number of social media influencers who create their videos from the driver's seat of their cars. Now we can add Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to that list. Just a day before he was taken into custody by U.S. forces, Mr. Maduro, while driving around the city of Caracas, put out a message that he was willing to work with U.S. demands. Well, let's take a look at this next report from TRT World.
One of the more bizarre of New Year message presentations from a world leader. Nicolas Maduro recorded his while driving his communication minister and a journalist through Caracas. In it, he extended an olive branch to the U.S.
The U.S. government knows because we have told many of their spokespeople that if they want to seriously discuss an agreement to combat drug trafficking, we are ready. If they want oil, Venezuela is ready for U.S. investment, like with Chevron, whenever they want it, wherever they want it, and however they want it.
Maduro's comments follow weeks of U.S. military strikes on boats allegedly carrying narcotics destined for the U.S. through the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. This is said to be video of one of the latest. And earlier this week, Donald Trump revealed that the Americans have carried out their first direct attack on Venezuelan territory.
There was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs, so we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area.
The U.S. has also seized 2 oil tankers off the Venezuelan coast. It claims they were transporting sanctioned oil. Its pursuit of a 3rd tanker has been complicated by a request from Moscow, which claims the vessel is flying under a Russian flag. Experts say the targeting of the tankers represents a change in approach from the U.S.
Now what we see is another strategy, and with it another tactic, which is to starve the regime of resources, to take away the money that it receives from basically illegal oil shipments.
And all this in addition to a huge U.S. military presence now assembled in the region. It's an open secret here in Washington that the Trump administration would like to see regime change in Venezuela. But it doesn't seek to achieve that through direct military intervention. It's hoping its pressure campaign will ultimately lead to a successful uprising against Maduro from within the country itself. But while Maduro may be ready to negotiate, he's still giving no sign that he's willing to succumb to American pressure and quit office. The question is whether he'll still be around to deliver his New Year's message for 2027.
Katan, it's kind of an interesting dialogue there from Venezuelan president. You know, before it seems like he's always made to seem as if he would not be willing to work with the United States. But there, you know, he gave the impression that he was very willing. Let's make a deal. If you want the oil, let's work something out. Instead of, you know, kind of always making him seem like, look, you know, you try anything and you're going to get it.
That's right. I kind of wonder what he sees on the horizon that's causing him to change his mindset in regards to the matter.
Right. Well, the deadline for the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, to integrate into the Syrian army has come and gone. That deadline being the end of 2025. The agreement for a military group to integrate with the Syrian army was made in March of 2025. Now, the talks between the group and the Syrian government have produced no results, and Turkey is now saying they would back Syria if they want to move forward without the Syrian Democratic Forces.
Well, the SDF is a Kurdish group supported by the United States, which controls oil fields, among other key areas in eastern Syria. Its leaders are the Kurdish People's Protection Units and Arab fighters. Well, they are responsible for removing ISIL's stronghold in the city of Raqqa in 2017. Now, currently, the SDF controls parts of Aleppo and a quarter of the entire Syrian country. Alongside the SDF are the United States, that is, are stationed 900 American fighters in the controlled territory to, of course, prevent the resurgence of ISIL. But what will occur now that there is still a division of forces in the Syrian country?
Well, we move now to the South China Sea, where Beijing has moved various of its military divisions into position around Taiwan for what it's calling military exercises. Now, Taiwan responded saying that it will defend democracy and has mobilized its forces into position. China's exercises come just days after the U.S. agreed to an $11 billion weapons package to Taipei. Now, a deal Beijing criticized and said that it will respond with, quote, forceful measures. Now, Taiwan's transportation minister, Chen Shiki, said of China, quote, we strongly protest, condemn their arrogant and unreasonable actions, which will inevitably affect the safety of our air and sea transportation.
Well, that weapons deal between Taiwan and the Trump administration includes 82 mobile rocket launchers, 420 long-range guided missiles. Now, those are surface-to-surface long-range missiles, and they have a range of up to like 300 kilometers. They're going to have 60 self-propelled artillery systems, including tanks, and within that cache, anti-tank missiles also. Now, of course, the records show that this sale could be the second largest sale to Taiwan after the nearly $16 billion sale to them during the George W. Bush term in 2001.
Well, for more on those live fire drills by China around Taiwan, an exercise that they call Justice Mission 2025, this next video sheds some light on what China hopes to accomplish and what Taiwan thinks about their moves. Take a look.
More rockets have been launched as China continued its massive live fire exercises off Taiwan. Beijing named the drills Justice Mission 2025, and they're widely seen as a show of force as China seeks to assert its claim that Taiwan is part of its sovereign territory. Since 1949, successive Chinese leaders have made it clear that military action would be used to seize the island. This time, the drills come on the heels of an $11 billion arms deal between the United States and Taiwan. And although the US wasn't mentioned, Beijing called the drills a stern warning to external forces. So, can the tension be contained? We'll discuss all that with our guests in just a moment. But first, Imogen Kimber reports.
Live fire during Chinese military maneuvers off the coast of Taiwan. These are the largest military drills China has ever carried out around the Pacific island. It follows the US announcing one of its biggest sales of military equipment to Taiwan, worth around $11 billion. Beijing says it's sending a stern warning to Taiwan against any attempts towards separatism and seeking independence by force.
In response to the large-scale US arms sales to Taiwan, we must, of course, resolutely oppose and forcefully counter them.
Taiwan says the drills violate international norms and pose a threat to peace.
These actions not only undermine cross-strait peace, but also threaten peace in the Indo-Pacific and global prosperity.
China has been increasing its displays of military might for years, but has recently intensified them.
Achieving total reunification of the motherland is in accordance with safeguarding national sovereignty and territorial integrity, and is a historical mission we must accomplish.
China occupied Taiwan from the 17th century, but ceded control to Japan at the end of the 19th. After Japan's defeat by Allied forces in World War II and takeover of control of China by the People's Communist Party, neither were in control of the island after 1949. US policy states that it will defend Taiwan. However, US President Donald Trump says he is not concerned by the latest developments.
Great relationship with President Xi, and he hasn't told me anything about it. I certainly have seen it, but he hasn't told me anything about it, and I don't believe he's going to be doing it. Nothing worries me. Nothing.
The US support for Taiwan angers China, and it's sanctioned around 30 US firms and individuals involved in the recent arms sales. But Taiwan is not the Americans' only ally in the Pacific. The US has a network of agreements with other states there. So if China did launch a bid to take Taiwan, the repercussions could potentially be far-reaching.
Yeah, you know, that's been an area of contention, like we've mentioned many times in the past. That area around Taiwan saying that, you know, we are a sovereign territory, you know, and we have the right to defend ourselves. Of course, the United States kind of easing into that area by supplying missiles to Taiwan and Beijing, saying, hey, that's a provocative move. You're in our territory. That's our land, and we'll fight for it.
Yeah, and it seems as if China purposely did their military drill just to show, you know, after this announcement of the $11 billion deal, like, look, we still have a lot of firepower that we can use.
That's right. Well, economic protests in Iran have been stirred up, but as eyes remain on the country during these times, protesters are starting to call for a change in the regime. So far, 7 protesters have died, and they're also targeting Iran's paramilitary forces as well. Well, with the growing frustration over the country's economy and the calls for Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, to step down, well, many are wondering if this could possibly be the start of a new Arab Spring 2.0, at least in Iran.
While Iran's economy is suffering and people are struggling to make ends meet, its government is intensifying efforts to its military weaponry, but not just conventional, but chemical and biological. Now, take a look at this next video for more on this developing story. Take a look.
Well, moving on to a development that could sharply raise the stakes in an already volatile Middle East. Iran is reportedly accelerating work on chemical and biological warheads designed for long-range ballistic missiles. It's a move that, if confirmed, would trigger an alarm in Washington, Tel Aviv, and beyond. According to media reports citing military officials, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has intensified efforts to develop unconventional missile payloads alongside upgrades to command and control systems. Well, these warheads, the reports say, are not meant to explode in the conventional sense, but to disperse chemical or biological agents over wide areas. At the same time, Iran's missile infrastructure is said to be expanding and repositioning. Some launch assets have reportedly been moved deeper into eastern Iran, reducing their vulnerability to potential Israeli or US strikes. Well, the message appears clear. Tehran is hardening its defenses and widening its options. If verified, such developments would violate international conventions banning chemical and biological weapons, treaties that Iran signed up to. The reports emerge against the backdrop of rising regional tensions. In June last year, Israel launched nearly 360 strikes across 27 Iranian provinces over 12 days. During the conflict, Iran relied heavily on ballistic missiles and drones in retaliatory strikes against Israel. Since then, Tehran has claimed it now possesses a new generation of advanced missiles. Israel is watching closely. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this week warned against Iran rebuilding its missile program. He raised the issue during a meeting with President Donald Trump. And Trump, for his part, warned that the United States could support further Israeli strikes if Iran advances its nuclear capabilities.
Iran has been greatly reduced in power, prestige. I don't want to use the word humiliation because, you know, they're trying to build up again. But we can't let them build up because if they build up, there can't be peace.
Meanwhile, Iran's leadership is striking an increasingly defiant tone. President Masoud Pezeshkian has declared Iran to be in a full-scale war with the US, Europe and Israel, and vowed harsh retaliation for any future attacks, saying Iran has a right to defend itself.
I emphasize that Iran does not seek permission from anyone to defend itself. The Iranian people's response to any widespread adventurism and evil is unapologetic and even unexpected.
Western intelligence agencies remain deeply concerned. The US intelligence community last year said Iran is likely to be continuing research and development of chemical and biological agents for offensive use. Iran has also accumulated uranium enriched to 60%, a level that brings it close to weapons-grade material. Tehran denies all the accusations, insisting its nuclear program is defensive and rejecting claims it's pursuing banned weapons. But skepticism remains high, and while tensions mount abroad, pressure is building at home as the country grapples with severe economic unrest. As Iran fortifies its missiles and hardens its rhetoric, the question now is not just how its rivals respond, but whether this accelerating arms posture is meant to deter conflict or if it risks pulling the region closer to another, far more dangerous confrontation.
Well, you know, you've got turmoil on the inside. Of course, the people there are protesting because of economic issues, but then you have the country spending all this money in developing weapons, particularly chemical and biologic weapons, and they're wondering, well, hey, why don't we put that money back into the people, into the country? Of course, Iran is not preparing or planning to really save its people as much as they are looking to go to war.
Right, but that seems to be the case in many different countries, that they'll spend it on military when the people really could use it. You know, it's just allocated and given to the governments for military purposes.
That's right. Well, to close us out, the United States have had several naval ships in the waters off of Venezuela, those Caribbean waters there, for several weeks now. Well, the U.S. government announced that the leader, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife were captured and removed from the country while a military attack went on in the early hours of the morning. Let's take a look.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Carissa Lawson. President Trump just announced on social media that Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, has been captured and flown out of the country. This comes a few hours after the U.S. hit Venezuelan military targets in Caracas, the country's capital. Here is the social post in full. The United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, who has been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. This operation was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. Details to follow. There will be a news conference today at 11 a.m. at Mar-a-Lago. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump.
Well, what we've heard is essentially what we've read. The statement from the president just a little while ago, quite stunning, that the United States has removed another country's leader and his wife, presumably forcibly against his will. Can't recall this ever happening, at least in modern history. The president, they're interestingly saying this operation was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. But just in the last few minutes, CBS News has learned Maduro was captured by Delta Force, the U.S. military's top special military or mission unit. This is the same unit that was responsible for killing al-Baghdadi, the ISIS leader, back in 2019. This is an elite unit of the U.S. Army that was involved in this strike or this operation here overnight. This began a few hours ago with apparent explosions over the skies of Caracas and other parts of Venezuela. And the president had given the U.S. military the green light to conduct land strikes inside Venezuela days before this actual operation. Two U.S. officials telling CBS News that they had discussed conducting the mission on Christmas Day, but U.S. airstrikes in Nigeria against ISIS targets took precedence that day. The days following Christmas opened up more potential strike windows to the U.S. military, but the operation's been held up for several days due to weather conditions over Venezuela. And the U.S. or the officials tell CBS News that the military had wanted weather conditions advantageous to mission success. And for those of us who had been anticipating something might occur and wondering why they were so hung up on the weather, perhaps now we understand if this element of capturing and removing Maduro and his wife was in fact part of the operation all along. Already overnight, we've seen some pretty swift and fierce political opposition to this from Republicans, notably, and Democrats, among them the Utah Senator Mike Lee, who's been saying that there are questions now about sort of the constitutionality of this and why Congress wasn't consulted. We know, for example, the Senate Armed Services Committee saying nobody on that committee was informed about this beforehand. So there'll be all sorts of questions about why the Trump administration wanted to do this, why it felt compelled to do it now. And it comes amid swift or widespread public opposition, widespread misunderstanding or a belief that the Trump administration hasn't explained why this is necessary. And so the fact that the president now is holding a news conference at 11 a.m. this morning at his Florida home perhaps will start filling in some of the details. But certainly there are big questions politically here in the United States, and certainly there will be around the world. We should point out the Venezuelans, the Cuban government, the Colombian government this morning calling on the United Nations and the Organization of American States, which is a hemisphere-wide body that deals with these kinds of political and military issues, should convene in emergency sessions to condemn this. And there are going to be widespread concerns around the world about the idea that the United States would go into another country, forcibly remove the person in charge, and whereabouts unknown at this point.
Now, this was a very swift military operation, Ed, with Maduro now being taken out of the country, as you've been talking about. What is the future of Venezuela at this point?
Well, that's a big part of this, and a big part of the concern certainly that policymakers in Washington will have and the rest of the world will have, is if you remove him, Maduro, someone who had flouted election results that were held in recent years in Venezuela, and you leave a vacuum there, either for the opposition government to be formed or for military leaders to lead it in the meantime, then it has the potential to create incredible economic, political, and security instability across that region. Remember, it's one of the largest oil producers in the world. It has been the source of waves of illegal immigration towards the United States in recent years, and there's been a real concern that further disruption of the government, of the economy, an economy that's already in shambles, could cause, mass migration out. Already overnight, we're hearing the Colombian government, for example, mobilizing military forces along its borders, concerned about the potential of an exodus of Venezuelans yet again. And there will be great question about who took Maduro or where he is. Is he here in the United States facing charges? Is he headed to a third country? There had been talk in recent weeks that perhaps Turkey, for example, would provide him safe haven. He's close with President Erdogan of Turkey. Will he, if U.S. law enforcement, as the president says, is involved, was he removed to face charges in the United States? If that's the case, then we're looking at something like General Manuel Noriega from Panama back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Katan, this is a major development here. The United States making this move, going into a country, taking the president and his wife out of the country, flying them back to the United States, now where they're going to face charges. But, this is not going to sit well in the international community. You have Russia and China who have already stated that they're not going to allow, that they would help Venezuela, that they would not allow the U.S. to bully this country, for the purpose of gaining its oil. And other smaller countries have to be wondering if the U.S. can get away with doing this to Venezuela, could they come in our country and do the same thing? So this is a very big move by the United States that is going to be, quite developing from this point to see what the countries, especially the big countries, China and Russia, are going to say and their actions that are going to follow.
That's right. And you're going to see how, as this unfolds over the next days and weeks, will this move empower the United States to do that to other countries? And will other countries kind of step up their defenses so that they can protect themselves from such things? Well, if you'd like to learn more about prophecies, and how you can prepare yourself and your family, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites. You can go to yahweh.com or yisroelhawkins.com. You can also go to yahwehsbranch.com. If you would like to visit our website, you can go to YPNnews.com. For any emails, you can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. For any international calls, please call the number that's on your screen. And if you haven't already done so, please check out the Yisroel Says program by going to yisroelsays.com and the Ask Yisroel program by going to askyisroel.com.
All right, well, don't go anywhere, because up next is another classic sermon by Yisroel Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.